My name is Ilaria Conti, and this afternoon, the banker who told me I was out of my depth is standing in my new office, sweating through his silk tie as I decide whether or not he still has a career. There is a specific kind of justice that doesn't require raised voices or threats. It only requires a signature and a shift in perspective. To the world, I was just a woman from Florence with a dream that was too big for her accent. To the man standing beside me, I am the reason he just liquidated $1 billion position to buy a bank. Have you ever been told that your dreams were unrealistic by someone who couldn't even see the horizon? Tell me your story in the comments. I came to London 3 years ago with a vision for a sustainable tech startup that would revolutionize how we track carbon footprints in global shipping. I have the data, I have the passion, and I have the Italian fire that doesn't know how to quit. But in the marble-lined halls of St. Jude's private bank, I was treated like a girl asking for a fairy tale. I had spent months perfecting my proposal, arriving at the meeting in a sharp blazer, my hair pulled back, and my Italian-accented English as precise as a surgeon's blade. The lead investment officer, a man named Mr. Sterling, didn't even finish reading my executive summary. He tossed the leather-bound folder onto the mahogany table with a dismissive flick of his wrist. He looked at his colleagues, 3 men who looked like they had been carved from the same piece of cold gray stone, and let out a short, condescending laugh. "It's a lovely idea, Miss Conti," Sterling said, leaning back in his chair. "Truly, very imaginative. But let's be realistic. This is a bank, not a charity for ambitious expatriates. You're asking for a £10 million line of credit with no domestic collateral and a business model that sounds like science fiction. Perhaps you should try a smaller, local branch, or perhaps go back to Florence and open a boutique. London is a shark tank, and you, my dear, are not a shark." I felt the sting of his words, a cold needle of humiliation. It wasn't just that he said no, it was the way he enjoyed the rejection. He saw my foreign name and my female face and decided I was a toy to be played with before being discarded. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I stood up, gathered my papers with steady hands, and looked him directly in the eyes. "I understand, Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice calm and melodic. "You believe my vision is unrealistic because it doesn't fit into the narrow box of your experience. Thank you for your time. I hope you remember this meeting as clearly as I will." I walked out of that bank and into the pouring London rain, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt a white-hot clarity. That evening, I sat in the library of a sprawling estate in Surrey, the home of my fiancé, Edward Lang. Edward is a man of shadows and silence. To the public, he is a private equity mogul with interests in shipping and infrastructure. To the people who walk the darker corridors of the city, he is the silent hand of the British Mafia, a man who controls the flow of capital and information with a terrifying, quiet efficiency. "The meeting didn't go well," Edward remarked, not looking up from his book. He didn't need to ask. He could read the tension in the set of my shoulders. "They laughed, Edward," I said, pouring myself a glass of red wine. I sat across from him and told him everything. I told him about Sterling's laugh, the comments about my unrealistic dreams, and the suggestion that I go back to Italy. I told him how they made me feel small, not because of my numbers, but because of who I am. Edward closed his book slowly. He didn't promise to break their legs. He didn't offer a dramatic speech about revenge. He simply looked at me with those piercing gray eyes and said, "St. Jude's is a mid-sized institution with a heavy reliance on short-term liquidity. They've been over-leveraged in the property market for months. I was already looking at their debt profile." He reached for his phone and dialed a number that connected him to a world most people don't know exists. "Marcus," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rasp, "I want the acquisition of St. Jude's accelerated. I don't care about the premium. I want the controlling interest in my hands by Monday morning. And Marcus, create a new chair on the executive board. For Ilaria." The weekend passed in a blur of quiet activity. While the world slept, Edward's team of financial analysts and enforcers in suits worked through the night. They didn't use violence. They used the weight of a superior predator. They bought up distressed shares, pressured board members with information that was never meant to be public, and executed a hostile takeover that was as surgical as it was absolute. On Monday morning, I returned to St. Jude's private bank. This time, I didn't have a folder in my hand. I didn't have an appointment. I was wearing a black silk suit that felt like armor. As I walked through the lobby, the tellers and junior staff looked at me with confusion, but as I reached the elevators to the executive floor, the atmosphere shifted. I walked into the boardroom without knocking. Mr. Sterling was there, mid-laugh, joking with the same colleagues about a weekend golf game. He looked up, his face contorting into an expression of annoyance. "Miss Conti, I believe I made myself clear on Friday," he said, standing up. "Security will."
Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more revenge and love stories. Turn on the bell notification to stay updated.
"Security is currently reporting to me, Mr. Sterling," a voice said from the doorway. Edward Lang stepped into the room, looking like a god of the underworld in a bespoke charcoal suit. He didn't look at the other men. He walked straight to the head of the table, pulled out the chair and gestured for me to sit. "What is the meaning of this?" Sterling demanded, his voice trembling slightly. "This is a private meeting." "Actually," Edward said, leaning over the table, his presence filling the room like a cold fog. "As of 8 a.m. today, St. Jude's is a subsidiary of Lang Global Holdings. I am the new owner, and since I value innovation and integrity above all else, I have appointed a new chairperson of the investment committee." He looked at me and nodded. "I believe you've met Ilaria Conti." The silence that followed was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. Sterling looked at me, his face turning a ghostly shade of white. He looked at the papers Edward tossed onto the table, the acquisition documents, the new bylaws, and the immediate termination notices for the current board, pending review. You bought the bank?" Sterling whispered, his knees finally giving out as he sank into his chair. "I bought the bank because you were too blind to see the value of the woman standing in front of you," Edward said. He turned to me, his expression softening for a fraction of a second. "The floor is yours, Ilaria." I sat in the chair that, 48 hours ago, represented the height of my humiliation. I looked at the men who had laughed at me. They weren't sharks. They were just small men in expensive suits who had mistaken their positions for power. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice echoing with a new, reinforced authority. "I've spent the morning reviewing your portfolio. Your realistic investments in the commercial sector are failing. Your risk assessment is outdated, and your treatment of potential clients is a liability to this institution's reputation. You told me London is a shark tank. You were right. But you forgot that some sharks don't need to show their teeth until they're already behind you." I pulled out a single sheet of paper, my original loan request for my startup. I picked up a pen, a heavy gold instrument that felt like a scepter. With a slow, deliberate stroke, I signed the approval. "This is my first act as chairperson," I said, sliding the paper toward him. "I am approving the funding for Conti Tech. And as for your position here, Mr. Sterling, your unrealistic dream of a comfortable retirement is now under review. You have 1 hour to clear your desk." Sterling didn't argue. He couldn't. He looked at Edward, who was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, a silent sentinel of absolute power. Sterling gathered his things in a daze, the mockery replaced by a crushing realization of his own insignificance. One by one, the other executives followed him out, leaving the room empty and quiet. Edward walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "How does it feel?" "It feels balanced," I said, looking at my signature on the page. "It wasn't about the money, Edward. It was about making sure that the next woman who walks into this room with a dream isn't met with a laugh." "You did that yourself," Edward said softly. "I just provided the ink." The aftermath of the takeover sent shockwaves through the city. St. Jude's became a hub for innovative, female-led startups, and my company, Conti Tech, grew into a global leader in environmental logistics. I stayed on as chairperson, not because I needed the title, but because I wanted to ensure that the culture of the bank remained one of respect and vision. I often think back to that Friday afternoon, the rain, the laugh, the feeling of being an outsider. I realize now that those moments of humiliation are often the seeds of our greatest triumphs. Karma didn't just come for Mr. Sterling, it came for the entire system that thought it could dismiss me. I still work long hours. I still push myself to be the best in the room. But now, when I walk through the halls of the bank, the silence isn't one of exclusion. It's one of respect. I am Ilaria Conti. I am a founder, a leader, and the woman who turned a no into an empire. Edward and I still share our quiet evenings in Surrey. We don't talk much about the bank. We don't have to. The power we share is understood. A silent pact between two people who know that true class never needs permission to exist. He is my protector, but I am his equal, and together we have built something that can never be broken by the laughter of small men. The world will always try to tell you where you belong. It will try to set limits on your ambition and boundaries on your soul. But if you stay calm, stay graceful, and keep your numbers right, the world has a funny way of shifting to fit your reality. I am no longer asking for a seat at the table. I own the table, the chairs, and the building may sit in. As I sign my last document of the day, I look out the window at the London skyline. The gray clouds are still there, but the sun is breaking through, turning the glass towers into pillars of light. I am exactly where I am meant to be. I am Ilaria Conti, and in this city, my dreams are the only reality that matters. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more Mafia love and justice stories. Where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more revenge and love stories. Turn on the bell notification to stay updated.